Seems like the light at the end of the tunnel may be you. The perfect quote that encapsulates the journey of a living rock legend, Steven Tyler. Yes, the same guy who revolutionized the whole rock and roll industry and caused major cultural shifts in music which resonated deeply with the audience in the 1960s and 1970s. His impact and his legacy in the world of music is something that cannot be overlooked at all. But then it is Hollywood we are talking about, and it seems that every story is just incomplete without drugs, alcohol, and women. While all of these have their fair share of involvement in his life, there was a time when he was searching for the light at the end of the tunnel. It took him some time to realize that it was him who was the light, and work towards it then. But how did he land up in a tunnel, or what was the problem that made him go from a full-time musician to a full-blown addict? To get your answers, stick along to the end of this video. Get your guitars ready as we take a dig at Steven Tyler, whose daughter finally admits what we all suspected. 1. Childhood. Stephen Victor Tallarico was born on March 26, 1948, in a musical household in Yonkers, New York. His father, Victor A. Tallarico, was a classical musician and a trained pianist who taught music at a local high school. Being born, as Stephen says it, under the keyboard, influenced his interest and passion for the craft accordingly. Through Victor's career, Stephen got to explore multiple dynamics within music. Although his dad and himself had their differences due to a structural musical path that his dad wanted him to follow, in stark contrast to the heavy metal lover he grew up to love. But apart from that, there were no major differences between them that could have caused major drifts in the relationship. However, having a piano at home deeply influenced his musical interests and made his love and passion grow more for the art. He practiced relentlessly and recalls an instance where he asked his dad for tips to get better. To which he had only one response: "Practice, my son, practice." These were the only words he was left with, and he made them his life. From then on, his musical journey has rather been inspiring. He started off music by playing piano, something which he inherited from his dad, and it would be later that his focus shifted to rock and roll. 2. Forming the band. Aerosmith came into being as a band in 1970 when the two bands met in Sunapee, New Hemisphere, where both had their performances scheduled for the night. At the time, Tyler still went on with his birth name Steven Tallarico and was performing for the band called the Chain Reaction. Joe Perry, on the other hand, was the lead guitarist for a Boston-based band known as the Jam Band, where he was assisted by Tom Hamilton as the bassist. Fortunately, their paths crossed with each other in the late 1960s. Steven was captivated by Joe's aggressive style of playing the guitar almost immediately. Their musical abilities let them skip the small talk stage where they were more than comfortable sharing the same room and space as friends. Along with appreciation for each other's musical talents, they developed a mutual respect towards each other as well. Additionally, they shared similar influences for blues, rock and roll, and British bands like the Yardbirds and the Rolling Stones. Their aligned music interests and fresh aspects that both of them brought to the table from the aspect of music made them decide to collaborate and form a band together which was named Aerosmith. It was in 1970 that they moved to Boston and officially formed the band. Here Tyler was the lead singer, Joe and Perry was the lead guitarist, Tom Hamilton was the bassist, Ray Tabano was on the rhythm guitar, and Joe Kramer was on drums. However, in 1971, Tabano was replaced by Brad Whitford and the band's development progressed from there. The band started with small gigs that eventually appealed to the local audience. Their aggressive performances, which were filled with energy, and the raw talent of every individual that collected on stage attracted the locals and big music industries as well, as they saw vast potential in the band. It was in 1972 that the band signed a contract with Columbia Records and went ahead to release a string of gold and platinum albums. The album featured songs like Dream, on which resonated with the audience deeply at the time. However, it was in 1975, when they released their third album, Toys in the Attic, that they broke into mainstream music. Songs like Sweet Emotion and Walk This Way became massive hits which solidified their image among the audiences and a hallmark in the history of rock musicians. The band's first 5 albums have often been regarded as multi-platinum status. Steven once mentioned, "I just want to get out there and rock and roll, and I love being with the band, and I love looking at pretty women in the front row." That's really what it is all about. He even described his relationship with Perry in one of his memoirs, where he said, "My whole life, I'd been searching for my mutant twin. I wanted a brother, and Joe was that missing link." Throughout the 1970s, the band toured extensively and charted a dozen Billboard Hot 100 singles, including their first top 40 hit. By the end of the decade, they were one of the most popular rock bands across the world and had made a huge and loyal fan base for themselves, often referred to as the Blue Army. While all was going well for the band and there was nothing more than they could have wanted, drugs and addiction came into play. 3. Roadblocks of the band. It was during the period of late 1970s and early 1980s that the band hit a massive roadblock. Important members of the band, such as Steven Tyler, who was engrossed in drugs, and Joe Perry, who was trying to get him back on track, often engaged in feuds due to the same reasons. This caused turmoil and disturbances among the members of the band, and it severely affected their overall image, which was rather impressive before all of this happened. If that wasn't enough, the band could not cope with their touring schedule as well, which demanded for them to stay on the top of their games, physically, mentally, and vocally. You can't engage an audience like they did unless and until it comes from within you. The constant traveling and performing in front of massive crowds were already too much, and being under the influence of drugs just made things worse for them. In 1979, there was a rather severe verbal confrontation between Joe and Steven backstage that forced Perry to quit the band and take a shot at pursuing his solo career. Perry's departure was followed by Brad Whitford in 1981. This made the band very unstable, and the album that came out in 1982, Rock in a Hard Place, was one of their most disappointing works to that date. Not only were the fans convinced that there was not that spark, but even the music and rock critics suggested the same notion, that the magic that was there earlier was not seen in this album. However, it was in 1984 that the original members of the band decided to come back together and take control of things. They released an album by the name Back in the Saddle. While it did not bring them back to the position they were in immediately, it was of little help as compared to the album in 1982. One of their primary motivations for coming back together was financial troubles and coming to terms with the fact that trying to perform solo was not turning out to be what was expected. It was after this point in time that Steven decided to take the rehab seriously. A significant point of comeback in their career as the band came in 1986. They collaborated with the hip-hop group Run DMC. The collaboration was overlooked by the producer Rick Rubin, who aspired to combine rock and hip-hop. Joe and Steven had their speculations regarding this collaboration, and they were not so sure about the fact that whether it would be a success or not. However, seeing their current condition at the time, they agreed to do it. This turned out to be a decision that would be appreciated for years together, as it turned out to be a huge success. The videos that came out as a result were extremely creative and appreciated by the masses, as it became a cultural hallmark within the music industry, and people found something new and exciting to jam on. They released an album, Permanent Vacation, in 1987 and Pump in 1989, which featured hits like Love in an Elevator and Janie's Got a Gun. The album reached number 5 on the Billboard 200 and sold a whopping 7 million copies in the US alone. Their platinum album spree did not stop there, as the years after that, including 1990, and from then on, were massive hits. Sold-out concert halls and albums became an everyday thing for both bands, and drugs were completely out of the picture. But what about the time when drugs were an everyday thing for Perry and Joe? Was it the reason that they both fought each other? 4. Drug addiction. It is no surprise that within less than 5 years since the band released their first album, they were loved by the audience. It did not take long for them to book out large venues within countries during the time they were touring extensively, more often in the 1970s. They were living the typical life of a rock star, where drugs and alcohol were a constant part of it. To keep it simple, just think of them as props which were important for the band to create the appropriate aura for the wild show they had to put on in front of the people. Additionally, while still young adults, success and fame came with their own set of responsibilities which might have been too much for the youngsters at the time to handle. To cope with the pressure, drugs seemed like the easy way out, and they were relatively available as well. Tyler even managed to have the parents of a 16-year-old groupie sign legal guardianship over him so that she could come on tour with the band. It's a no-brainer that the band was supremely talented, and it was the way they wrote their lyrics and their performances turned out to be that they got so much fame. Despite all that, their behind-the-scenes life was not so secret after all. The audiences were aware of their excessive drug use, which later turned into abuse. At one point in time, Joe and Steven were named the toxic duo for their extensive drug usage. Perry's memoir, titled Does the Noise in My Head Bother You?, gives a detailed list of the drugs that he and Steven consumed daily. It included marijuana, cocaine, heroin, LSD, methadone, OxyContin, and methamphetamine, and cocaine. Doctors said it was not addictive. It was habituating. They didn't know at the time that the drug would eventually take a sharp turn after a certain day. Blow, once the life of the party, became the stuff of fear and loathing, the source of devious and secretive behavior, and the mother of all lies. What, me? No, I don't have any, sorry. Ran out? Bummer, man, nope. Hey, I gotta go to the bathroom, and that's where the rock and roll bathroom came from. That's when people started keeping stuff in two pockets. You had your courtesy bindle, you'd share your sock. And thus sin and doubt entered our happy world. Steven Tyler, does the noise in my head bother you? Steven also mentioned, I found certain drugs I loved and didn't stop to the point of hurting my children, hurting my life, hurting my family, and hurting my family, and hurting my band. There was a point where I didn't have a band and I didn't care. Steven's mother also raised significant questions as to why he needed drugs in the first place if he got his thrill from the crowd and performed on stage. To this Steve said, I was good on stage, so why not be high too? I was already addicted to adrenaline, so why not get higher? It was later that his band members approached him and insisted he get into a rehab program. While Steven was frustrated with it at first, thinking that it would temper his creativity, he later agreed to it. It was not easy, as the band members had to give him a choice. It was either go into rehab or he had to leave the band. While he did get into the rehab program, being sober did not come naturally to him, and he struggled with drugs from 1980 to 2010. Apart from rehab, he attended 12-step meetings, joined various supportive groups, and even spent an ample amount of time with friends and family. However, the relapse episodes often get triggered due to some other odd reason. Despite all this struggle, it has been 9 years as of today that he has been sober. He recalls instances where drugs did not just affect his professional growth, but his personal growth as well, as his family and close ones were impacted as well, and that too in a negative way. This was one of the primary reasons that he was kept away from one of his daughters and lessened until she was 9 years old. More on that later, but let us stick to Steve for this one. In instances where he has given interviews after being sober, he has been open about the discussion regarding his past and life as a drug addict. He does not hold any kind of remorse or regret for what happened, as according to him, it was all in the past, and that does not change who he was or who he is, saying that he plans to stay sober from now on. While speaking on Joe Rogan's Experiences podcast, he was asked a question related to his being sober. Throughout the podcast, he maintained a positive outlook on speaking about the topic. Additionally, he said, getting sober has allowed me to see things clearly. It's like putting on your glasses for the first time and being able to see your life without distortion. You think you're using drugs, but in the end, the drugs are using you. You lose everything you have, all your dreams, your creativity, your relationships. The biggest realization was that I'm more creative sober. I thought the drugs were helping, but they were really just an illusion. 5. Relationships. The renowned lead singer for the Aerosmith was involved in numerous high-profile relationships that caught the public and media's attention alike on multiple occasions. His first relationship was rather troublesome, and there was nothing much that he gained out of it. This was with Julia Holcomb in 1973. At the time, Tyler was 25 and she was only 16. Remember, we spoke of a teenager's mom who was convinced by Tyler to sign the guardianship for him. She was the one. Their relationship raised quite several eyebrows, which was mostly due to the sheer age gap between both the individuals involved. Additionally, their relationship was largely influenced by drugs and rock and roll at the time. They decided to end things for good when she had to get an abortion for an unwanted pregnancy and their apartment caught fire. It was later that she came out to speak of the relationship and concluded that it was severely traumatizing for her from a psychological point of view. After her, Steven got involved with BB which started in 1976. While they were stable for a while, it was after the birth of their daughter Liv that she decided to distance herself from Tyler due to his drug abuse issues. We will talk about it in detail in a later part of this video. Serinda Fox came into his life in 1977. It was when the influence of drugs was strong in Tyler's life. Despite this, they gave birth to Mia Tyler in 1978. While Fox died in 2002 due to brain cancer, she did not have many pleasant memories from their relationship. However, she did mention the fact that during her final years, Tyler was with her and even supported her financially for medical purposes. The next one proved to be one of the most stable relationships of Tyler, which lasted from 1988 to 2006. It was with a fashion designer named Teresa Barrick. They fell in love quite instantly and decided to marry. Their marriage brought Chelsea Tyler in 1989 and Taj Monroe Tallarico in 1991. This marked a period where Tyler was on and off drugs. He was focusing on rehab, however, the relapse episodes were pretty common at the time. After being together for more than a decade, they announced separation in 2005 and got divorced in 2006. Aaron Brady was next, who came in as a tour accountant for the band. The The couple engaged after years of dating each other. It was in 2011 that Tyler proposed to her during a vacation in Hawaii. After that, you guessed it, the media kept spamming the couple because of the age difference and Tyler's reputation as a rock star. While it might have looked promising at the time, it was genuinely not. The couple decided to go their separate ways in 2013. While there could have been many unknown reasons for that, there were a few evident ones brought to light by media personnel. One of them was Tyler's fame as a rock star, which kept hindering their lives. Additionally, it was the pressure of Tyler's commitment to the band and the relationship that kept getting stuck in a stalemate. So it was in 2013 that the couple concluded that parting ways was the best thing to do for the both of them. Amy Preston came into his life in 2014. Having worked with Tyler before as her assistant, the couple were aware of each other. They announced the relationship in 2016, and while it may have been evident way before that, the official announcement made by them as a couple was in 2016. Unlike other relationships that he has had in the past, he decided to keep this one under wraps. There was no intention at all to disclose this like his other relationship in front of the public. So the media only knew what the couple wanted them to do. They are still together and happy, as they have been spotted on multiple occasions at charity events and other Hollywood events. She even supported the fundraising campaign for abused girls along with Steven and his daughter Mia. 6. An interesting fact. Tyler has a deep respect and interest in India as a country. During the 1960s and 70s, unlike other rock artists, he was drawn to India. As a country, India was gaining significant attention from the Western world due to its mysticism, spiritual practices, culture, and tradition. All of this deeply resonated with Tyler. It is believed that during the time he was going through drug addiction, he might have taken the spiritual route for help as well, which was supposedly inspired by Indian practices. Additionally, he was fascinated by the grandeur and significance of the monument Taj Mahal, which is situated in India and is a part of the 7 wonders of the world. He was so inspired and moved by it that he decided to name his son Taj after the monument Taj Mahal. This was certainly a unique and bold step, as you do not get to see every day when stars like Steven name their kids after a monument that they were fascinated by from another country. 7. The third daughter. By now, it's evident that Steven was not the one with the most stable relationships. Having 4 kids with different partners and being involved with women otherwise as well, this was somewhat of a bad reputation for him. However, as we have discussed in many of our other Hollywood celebrity-oriented videos, he was far from the first one to engage in such acts. Rather, there have been people whose situation was even more dire than this. Want to understand more of what we are talking about? Then feel free to check out some of our other videos related to celebrities who crossed their boundaries with other female actors. But for now, let's stick to Steven Tyler, shall we? While we were discussing episodes of Steven's life where he was an addict, we even spoke of instances where his personal relationship was tempered. One of the most bizarre cases involved him not being aware for 9 years straight that he had a third daughter, whose name was Liv Rundgren Tyler now. What was this all about? How did Steven and Liv come to discover each other, and where does their relationship stand today? Let us understand all these aspects one by one. Well, for starters, it would be appropriate to clarify Liv's origin. She was born on July 1st, 1997, in New York City to a model and singer named Bibi Buell. In her initial years, which was approximately the first 9 to 10 years of her life, she was raised under the impression that her real dad was Todd Rundgren, which was far from the truth. This is where Tyler's drug addiction came in. Tyler at the time was a complete mess within himself. There were so many battles that he was fighting at the same time. Along with facing his drug addiction, which included constant rehab and episodes of relapse to get his financial condition stable once again and get back in the band, it is safe to say that he was preoccupied. Another supporting factor that motivated BB to not disclose this information to Steven was the fact that he had episodes of rage sometimes while under the influence of narcotics, which she felt was not the right environment for Liv to grow in. Another twist was the fact that neither Liv was aware that she wasn't living with her biological father, but even Todd was not aware that he was raising someone else's child. Talk about a messy family. It was in the early 1970s that BB and Todd were in a relationship. By the time Liv was born, they had separated. However, Todd still decided to sign the birth certificate for Liv and took full responsibility for her as her daughter. While Todd had doubts about the origin of the child, he accepted her anyway, because he loved BB too much. Despite all that was going on, not even for a single second did Todd let Liv go through any struggle. He took care of her in the best way possible and made sure that all her needs were met. Being a successful musician himself, he ensured that she got the best of everything, whether it was education or anything related to her lifestyle. Liv has rather been open to pointing out the positive impacts that Todd has had on his life. However, as she grew up, she started to have her suspicions and felt that something wasn't right. Things turned around for good when she was 9 years old. Her mother insisted that they go on one of Steven's shows. While Liv was not up for it, she agreed to it anyway. There, the truth unfolded in front of her eyes. When she saw Steven, she immediately saw a striking resemblance between them, which she knew was not a mere coincidence. However, her intuition was sealed when she was standing next to her stepsister Mia during a concert. Liv said, "I kind of figured it out because he looked exactly like me. I have a sister named Mia who is a year younger than me, and I saw her standing on the side of a stage at a concert, and literally, it was like looking at my twin. She looked exactly like me. Then I looked at my mom and she had tears in her eyes. Since then, both of them have been significantly close as father and daughter." Moving on front here, Steven made the relationship public and was more than fascinated to break the news about her daughter to the world. In 1991, he released a song titled "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing," in which her daughter was one of the main actors, who was 16 at the time. Being involved in the supportive character of her newfound daughter, Steven was present at the time when she gave birth to his grandson. Steven said, "When I got the call that Liv was going into labor, after crying like a baby myself, I immediately dropped everything and went to the airport to get on the next available flight. I made it right in time before my second grandson entered this world. Turns out he was the one who cut the umbilical cord." Not only that, Steven has gone to be an amazing grandfather who is loved by his grandchild. As per Liv, he often visits and plays with them like his own. He switches from a serious musician and a renowned figure to somewhat of a magician. He talks to them in an animal tone and loves spending time with them. However, Steven, being himself, made things awkward on one silly occasion. He asked out one of Liv's friends, Cameron Diaz, on a date. It was before they went out that Liv intervened and asked him to call it off, which he did. All said and done, it is undeniable that Steven did have a notorious past. But then he leaped for the chance he got and bounced back in his career. This choice in turn helped him to finally know that he had a third daughter. Steven, who once would have been a negative figure in Liv's life, is now one of the most lovable ones. Love and hate are connected more than many of us would like to think of. Similar was the case with Steven and his daughter Liv. Once the news was clear to them, Liv was upset with her mother for keeping the secret. However, she realized soon enough that it was for her benefit only, and there was no inspiration from a revenge plot whatsoever. What was the most fascinating fact that you came across in this video? Are you a hardcore fan of Steven, or were you aware of some of this before? Tell us in the comments below. Do not forget to click that subscribe button for more such content. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to drop a like and share it with all your friends and family.